Family can be both a blessing and a challenge, and growing up in mine often felt like a delicate balancing act. On the surface, we seemed like a typical family. Parents who worked hard, siblings who bickered but loved each other, and shared traditions that brought us together. But beneath that veneer was a constant undercurrent of favoritism and entitlement, all centered around my older sister, Bonnie. Bonnie had always been the golden child. She excelled in school, charmed adults with her quick wit, and had a knack for getting what she wanted. From a young age, she knew how to turn on the charm for our parents, and they, in turn, doted on her endlessly. "Bonnie deserves it," Mom would say whenever I questioned why Bonnie got the bigger piece of cake, the newer clothes, or the better birthday presents. "She's older," Dad would add. "You'll understand when you're her age." But as I grew older, I began to see that Bonnie's charm wasn't just a gift, it was a weapon. She knew how to manipulate situations to her advantage, often at the expense of others. If something went wrong, Bonnie always found a way to shift the blame. If there was praise to be had, she was first in line to claim it, even if the effort hadn't been hers. By the time we were adults, Bonnie's entitlement had become second nature. She demanded attention, monopolized family gatherings, and expected everyone to cater to her needs. It wasn't just frustrating, it was exhausting. I, on the other hand, learned to fade into the background. If Bonnie was the sun, I was the moon, quiet, steady, and content to shine in her shadow. But as much as I tried to stay out of her way, her actions often dragged me into the chaos. The turning point came when I landed my first stable job after college. For the first time, I had financial independence and the ability to treat my family to things I had always dreamed of giving them. While Bonnie spent lavishly on herself, I focused on saving and planning for moments that would bring us all together. That's how the idea for the family vacation came about. I wanted to do something special for our parents, a way to thank them for their sacrifices and create memories we could all cherish. It wasn't an extravagant trip, just a week-long getaway to a picturesque cabin by the lake, but it felt like the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of daily life. I spent months planning every detail, from the accommodations to the activities. It was my way of giving back to the people who had shaped me, flaws and all. But as excited as I was about the trip, I knew one thing for certain. Bonnie would find a way to complicate it. Once I had the idea for the family vacation, I threw myself into the planning process. I wanted it to be perfect, something our parents would cherish and something that might bring us all closer, even Bonnie. I chose a charming lakeside cabin nestled in the woods. It was the kind of place that invited relaxation, with breathtaking views, plenty of outdoor activities, and enough space for all of us to enjoy some privacy. I imagined mornings filled with coffee on the deck, afternoons spent kayaking or hiking, and evenings by the fire sharing stories and laughter. After weeks of research and budgeting, I booked the cabin and started making arrangements. I wanted it to be a surprise for our parents, so I kept everything under wraps. But there was one obstacle I couldn't avoid: Bonnie. To include her or not was a question I wrestled with for days. On one hand, she was family, and excluding her felt wrong. On the other hand, her tendency to dominate every situation made me hesitate. Would her presence turn this carefully planned trip into yet another Bonnie-centric drama? Ultimately, I decided to invite her. Despite our differences, I hoped this trip could be a chance to mend fences and create positive memories. When I called her to share the news, her initial reaction was surprisingly warm. "That sounds amazing," she said, her excitement catching me off guard. "A whole week by the lake? Count me in." Her enthusiasm gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe this time, things would be different. I spent the next few weeks finalizing details. I booked activities like a guided hike, a boat rental, and a family dinner at a nearby lodge. I even created a shared itinerary to keep everyone on the same page. When the day came to surprise our parents, their reactions made all the effort worth it. "A vacation?" Mom said, her eyes lighting up. "You planned this all by yourself?" "I thought it would be a nice way to spend time together," I said, smiling. Dad clapped me on the shoulder, his voice warm. "You've outdone yourself, kid." Even Bonnie seemed genuinely appreciative, chiming in with ideas for things we could do during the trip. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this could work, that we could have a drama-free week as a family. But my optimism didn't last long. A few days before the trip, I got a call from Bonnie. Her tone was casual, but there was an edge to it that immediately put me on guard. "So, I was thinking," she began, "why don't we bring a few more people along?" "Who are you talking about?" I asked, already dreading her answer. "Oh, just a couple of my friends," she said breezily. "You've already booked the cabin, right? There's plenty of space." I felt my stomach drop. "Bonnie, this is a family trip. It's supposed to be for us." "Yeah, but the more, the merrier," she insisted. "Besides, they'd help cover the cost." "I'm not asking anyone to pitch in," I said firmly. "This trip is my gift to the family, and I don't want to add extra people into the mix." Her tone shifted, a hint of annoyance creeping in. "Why are you being so difficult? They barely take up any space. And honestly, it's not fair for you to make all the decisions when it's a family trip." I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. "I planned this trip for Mom, Dad, you, and me. That's it. If you want to bring friends, you'll need to plan your own trip." Bonnie huffed, clearly displeased. "Fine, but you're being really selfish about this." The call ended on a sour note, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of Bonnie's interference. The uneasy truce I had managed to maintain with Bonnie began to unravel as the trip drew closer. Her call about inviting friends was just the tip of the iceberg. It became clear that she wasn't content to simply join the vacation. She wanted to take control of it. A few days before we were set to leave, Bonnie called again. This time, her tone was less casual and more authoritative. "I've been looking into the area," she began, as though she were the one who had planned the trip, "and I think we should change some of the activities you scheduled." I sighed, already feeling the tension build. "Bonnie, everything's already booked. The itinerary is set." "Well, I don't think hiking is really Mom's thing," she said dismissively. "And that boat rental? A little unnecessary, don't you think?" "It's not about whether it's your thing or not," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This trip is about spending time together and giving Mom and Dad a break. Everything's been planned with them in mind." She let out an exaggerated sigh. "I just think you're overcomplicating it. We should focus on relaxing, not cramming in a bunch of activities." I could feel my patience wearing thin. "Bonnie, I've spent months planning this. If you don't like the itinerary, you're free to sit out on the activities." That didn't go over well. "You're so controlling," she snapped. "Why does everything have to be your way?" "It's my gift to the family," I said firmly. "If you can't appreciate that, maybe you shouldn't come." The line went silent for a moment before she spoke again, her voice cold. "Fine, do whatever you want." The conversation left a sour taste in my mouth, but I was determined not to let it ruin the trip. Unfortunately, Bonnie had other plans. The day before we were set to leave, I received an email notification that one of the reservations I had made, a guided boat tour, had been canceled. Confused, I called the company to find out what had happened. "Oh, someone named Bonnie called earlier," the representative said. "She told us to cancel the reservation because the group wouldn't be able to make it." I felt a surge of anger. Bonnie had gone behind my back and canceled part of the trip I had painstakingly planned. I immediately called her. "What the hell, Bonnie?" I said as soon as she picked up. "Excuse me," she said, feigning innocence. "You canceled the boat tour," I said through gritted teeth. "Why would you do that?" "I was trying to help," she said defensively. "You're so stressed about all these plans, and I figured one less thing would make it easier." "That wasn't your decision to make," I snapped. "This isn't your trip to rearrange." She scoffed. "Maybe if you weren't so uptight, this wouldn't be such a big deal." "Bonnie, if you can't respect the effort I've put into this trip, maybe you shouldn't come," I said, my voice firm. "Oh, so now you're kicking me out," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "No," I said. "I'm giving you a choice. Either you come on this trip and respect the plans I've made, or you don't come at all." The call ended in a stalemate, and I spent the rest of the evening stewing over her actions. When the day of the trip arrived, Bonnie showed up at the meeting point, but her attitude was unmistakable. She barely spoke to me and made it clear through her passive-aggressive comments that she wasn't happy. But despite her antics, I was determined to salvage the trip. Bonnie's mood on the morning of the trip was as stormy as the weather forecast had predicted for the week. She arrived with a sour expression, her arms crossed and her voice dripping with passive aggression every time she spoke. "Are we really leaving this early?" she muttered as I loaded the car. "You didn't even give me a chance to grab a coffee." "Bonnie, the schedule is tight," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "If we leave any later, we'll miss check-in at the cabin." "Of course," she said, rolling her eyes. "Because everything has to go according to your plan." I ignored the comment and focused on keeping the atmosphere as light as possible for our parents, who were visibly excited despite Bonnie's behavior. The drive to the cabin was tense. While our parents chatted happily in the back seat, Bonnie alternated between scrolling on her phone and making thinly veiled jabs at the itinerary. "I saw a spa near the cabin," she said at one point. "Maybe we should scrap the hike and do something more relaxing instead?" Before I could respond, Mom chimed in. "Oh, I love the idea of a hike," she said cheerfully. "It's been ages since we've done something like that as a family." Bonnie didn't respond, but the glare she shot me through the rearview mirror spoke volumes. When we finally arrived at the cabin, the tension reached its boiling point. The place was perfect, spacious, cozy, and surrounded by stunning views of the lake and forest. Our parents were thrilled, marveling at the decor and the beautiful scenery. But Bonnie was unimpressed. "This is it," she said, wrinkling her nose as she stepped inside. "I thought it would be bigger." I took a deep breath, reminding myself not to engage. "It's exactly what I booked," I said, forcing a smile. As the evening wore on, Bonnie's complaints became more frequent. She criticized everything from the sleeping arrangements to the menu I had planned for the week. "Do we really have to eat dinner at the lodge tomorrow?" she asked. "It's so much easier to just order takeout." "Bonnie," I said, my patience wearing thin, "this trip isn't about convenience. It's about spending quality time as a family." "Quality time," she scoffed. "You mean forcing everyone to follow your rigid schedule?" Her words stung, but I refused to let her derail the trip. Later that night, as everyone was settling in, I overheard Bonnie talking to Mom in the kitchen. "I just think the trip would be more fun if we loosened things up," she was saying. "Michael's trying too hard to control everything." Mom's response surprised me. "Bonnie, he put so much effort into planning this for us," she said gently. "Can't you just appreciate that and let him lead?" I didn't hear Bonnie's reply, but the fact that Mom had defended me was enough to bring a small smile to my face. The next morning, however, Bonnie's behavior escalated. She announced at breakfast that she had found a spa nearby and planned to spend the day there instead of joining us for the planned hike. "That's not the point of this trip," I said, unable to hide my frustration. "Well, excuse me for wanting to enjoy myself," she shot back. Before I could respond, Dad interjected. "Bonnie, enough," he said firmly. "This trip is about the family. If you're not willing to participate, maybe you should have stayed home." Her jaw dropped, and for the first time in years, she was left speechless. With Bonnie's behavior finally addressed by Dad, the atmosphere at the cabin shifted. For the first time since the trip began, there was a sense of peace. While Bonnie sulked and stayed behind to explore the spa she had mentioned, the rest of us set out for the planned hike. The morning air was crisp, and the trail wound through a dense forest, sunlight filtering through the leaves in golden rays. Mom was in high spirits, chatting about the trees and reminiscing about family outings from years past. Dad, usually reserved, seemed to let his guard down, laughing and sharing stories about his own childhood. "This is exactly what I needed," Mom said, pausing to take in the view from a scenic overlook. The lake stretched out below us, glittering in the sunlight. Hearing her say that made every stressful moment of planning worth it. As the day went on, I began to notice something unexpected. Without Bonnie's presence, the dynamic between the three of us was lighter, more relaxed. Conversations flowed naturally, free from the tension and competitiveness that usually came with her constant need for attention. When we returned to the cabin that evening, Bonnie was waiting for us, her mood as chilly as the evening air. She barely acknowledged us, retreating to her room with a pointed, "Hope you had fun," rather than letting her negativity dampen the mood. I focused on enjoying the evening with Mom and Dad. We cooked dinner together, laughed over old family photos, and even played a board game I'd found tucked away in one of the cabin's closets. The following days followed a similar pattern. Bonnie participated in some activities but kept her distance during others, her attitude oscillating between indifference and quiet resentment. On the third day, something remarkable happened. While kayaking on the lake, Mom turned to me and said, "I'm so proud of you, Michael. You've really come into your own." Her words caught me off guard. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice tinged with emotion. She smiled, her expression thoughtful. "I know things haven't always been fair between you and Bonnie," she said, "but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done, for this trip and for the family." It was a moment I hadn't realized I needed. For so long, I had felt overshadowed by Bonnie, my efforts often dismissed or overlooked. Hearing Mom acknowledge my contributions was a balm to an old wound. Even Dad, who rarely expressed emotions openly, seemed to warm up over the course of the trip. On our last evening at the cabin, as we sat around the fire roasting marshmallows, he patted my shoulder and said, "You did good, kid." By the time the trip ended, it was clear that something had shifted. Mom and Dad's perspective on Bonnie's behavior and mine seemed to have evolved. As we packed up the car, Bonnie remained sullen, offering little more than a half-hearted, "It was fine," when I asked if she had enjoyed the trip. But despite her attitude, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had given my parents a week filled with love, laughter, and memories, something no amount of drama could take away. Returning home after the vacation, I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. The trip, despite its rocky start and Bonnie's antics, had been a success. Mom and Dad were happy, and for the first time in years, I felt like my efforts to bring the family together had been seen and appreciated. But if I thought Bonnie would let things go, I was sorely mistaken. Within days of our return, she began spreading her version of events to anyone who would listen. She told extended family members that the trip was a disaster, painting herself as the victim of my so-called controlling behavior. "I just wanted to have fun, but Michael had to make it all about him," she said during a family gathering. "He didn't listen to anyone else's opinions." I heard about her complaints secondhand, from cousins and aunts who had always been quick to defend Bonnie. At first, the rumors stung. After all the work I had put into planning the trip, hearing her twist the narrative felt like a slap in the face. But as the weeks went on, I noticed something surprising. Fewer people were buying into her version of events. "She's overreacting," my cousin Lisa said during a phone call. "I talked to your mom, and she said the trip was wonderful. Don't let Bonnie get to you." Even Mom and Dad, who had often been blind to Bonnie's manipulations in the past, seemed to see through her this time. "I heard what Bonnie's been saying," Mom said one evening as we talked on the phone. "Don't pay any attention to her. She's just upset because she didn't get her way." Hearing Mom's support meant more than I could express. For so long, I had felt like my voice didn't matter, like Bonnie's antics would always overshadow my efforts. But this time, the truth had prevailed. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting on the lessons the trip had taught me. First and foremost, I realized the importance of boundaries. For years, I had bent over backward to accommodate Bonnie, hoping that if I tried hard enough, she might finally treat me with the same respect she demanded from everyone else. But the trip had shown me that her behavior wasn't my responsibility to fix. By standing my ground and refusing to let her hijack the vacation, I had reclaimed a sense of agency that I hadn't realized I'd lost. I also learned the value of focusing on the relationships that truly mattered. While Bonnie continued to spin her web of complaints, I chose to invest my energy in the people who supported and appreciated me. My relationship with Mom and Dad had strengthened in the wake of the trip. They began reaching out more often, inviting me over for dinner or calling just to check in. "We're so proud of you," Dad said during one of our conversations. "You've grown into someone we can rely on, and that means a lot." Those words, simple as they were, carried a weight I had longed for my entire life. As for Bonnie, I decided to let her live in her own narrative. Her antics no longer had the power to hurt me because I no longer gave them that power. Looking back, I realized that the vacation had been more than just a trip. It had been a turning point. It had forced me to confront old wounds, redefine my priorities, and take a stand for myself. To anyone who has ever dealt with a difficult family member, I want to say this. You can't control how others behave, but you can control how you respond. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. And sometimes, choosing your own peace is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Today, my life feels lighter. I've learned to focus on the relationships that bring me joy and let go of the ones that drain me. The trip may not have gone perfectly, but it taught me lessons I'll carry for the rest of my life. Here's to growth, self-respect, and the courage to stand tall, no matter what.